I'm Afzal Khan, Manchester Media Group's news producer, and today I'm joined by Afzal Khan MP for Gorton. Please could you start by introducing yourself and also sort of briefly explain your recent resignation?
Well, I'm Afzal Khan, like you heard, I'm MP for Manchester Gorton, which is going to be changed over, the boundary changes to Manchester Resham. And last week I resigned, and it's to do with what is happening. We've all seen the terrible things that are going on in Gaza. We started, I think, on the 7th of October when some of the Hamas fighters went into Israel. Such a huge loss there of life, and then taken some people as hostages, and then we've seen the bombardment that has been happening in Gaza. And I found it really troubling, the whole thing. Loss of life is around 15,000, and we've seen a pause. Many more bodies will be found in rubble, 5,000 or so are young people. And I felt, there was a need for a ceasefire. One was the scale of loss of innocent lives. And the second, I fundamentally believe that this is a long-standing dispute which has been going on for nearly 75 years, or some people say it's going on for nearly 100 years now. The need for this issue to be resolved, and we seem to have an idea how it should be resolved. There are UN resolutions there. Basically, there should be two states. So the Palestinians also have a state. So that is what needs to be achieved. So why going through the wars when we know what the answer is? So I felt, we need to stop this killing, stop this loss of innocent life, and then push both sides, help them to get to the place we all agree.
So you said that you voted for the ceasefire, which was obviously put forward by the SNP, and that wasn't the official position of Labour, which was to have a humanitarian pause. I just wondered, could you explain what is the difference between a ceasefire and a humanitarian pause? Because I don't think there's enough information on that.
Yeah. I think, again, for your viewers, for me, first of all, the amendment Labour had put forward actually did have lots of good things in it, and I also supported that. But the key difference is the question that you're raising, the pause and the ceasefire. And I think the fundamental difference between the two is pause is for a limited duration, in the sense of enough to help some people, all the difficulties that they're going through. We've seen the schools, the hospitals, the food, the water, all that. So that's the pause idea. But for me, the pause is almost like just adding a plaster. And another way of looking at it is pause is just giving some people food and then being killed. The important point is stop killing. And that would happen with a ceasefire. And by having a ceasefire, that gives us enough time to work on to the core matter. The danger ultimately is we just keep going through this cycle of violence, and we just deal with the cause, not the root, the symptoms, not the root of the problem. So the symptom is not good enough for me.
And so why did your position on this vote mean that you had to resign from your post?
So because the Labour position was that they had their own amendment, so they were not supporting the SNP's amendment. And I felt that what we were offering was good, but it wasn't good enough in the sense that they were going a step further, which was ceasefire, which was more in line with my position. And I thought I was happy to support that too. And in Parliament, there is a rule: if you are on the front bench, which means you are a shadow minister, then there is a collective responsibility. So what the leadership decides, you are all responsible for that. And because I was going against that by asking for a ceasefire, not a pause, then it's the only right thing to do then is to resign, so that I am then free from that collective responsibility, and that's why I had to do it.
So why do you think Keir Starmer was so adamant that people in the Labour Party needed to vote for a humanitarian pause and not a ceasefire?
I think his thinking is that, number one, what is realistically achievable? For the ceasefire, in a way, you need sort of both parties agreeing. But I think for pause, you also need both sides agreeing. So to me, there's not much difference in that. The second point is, I think he felt that we need to go along with our partners. And in this case, I suppose what we're all talking about is America. And my view on that one is, while I acknowledge the importance of America, but I think if our good friend is in the wrong place, as a sincere friend, then you have a duty to tell him, not to go along with it. And I think at the moment, the positioning of America actually is very biased, is too much tilted towards Israel, when this is a complex issue with a long history, and the oppressed or the occupied people are the Palestinians actually. That, I think, fundamental difference. So not to take that into account, to me, is unfair. And I felt that actually, if you look at the UN, which is the main body in the global point of view, there was this discussion, and 120 countries voted for the ceasefire. Only 16 voted not for a ceasefire. So again, the world opinion is also, you could say, reflects that. But in Britain, you can also see this, that week after week, in all major cities, there's hundreds of thousands of people coming out asking for a ceasefire. So again, we should, as a representative body, a parliament, as an MPs, surely we should take that into account. That there's such a large number of people saying ceasefire, then that was another reason. And I myself had over 6,000 emails, people asking me. Now, I have never had anything close to this in the last sort of 6 years, which matches this. The most you would have is 200, 300, 500 is big, you know. But this is a different scale, 6,000. So that's basically why.
So that response that you had, was that from sort of your constituents, which includes a lot of students, or have you had like a different response from your wider constituency?
No, I think overwhelming people across the board who have written to me have been saying this has to stop. I think overwhelming people have seen their own television, the news, the videos, social media, the carnage that has been happening, this carpet bombing that has been taking place. You know, I can't see any other war in such a short time. So much innocent life have been lost, and people have done some comparisons, you know. Nothing matches this. You know, this is way ahead. So clearly something is not right. And then there are international laws which govern war. And that includes the idea of trying to avoid killing innocent people. It's trying to avoid attacking schools, attacking ambulances, attacking hospitals. We've seen all that happening here, you know. There's rules on starvation, that you can't cut off gas, electricity, water and all that, you know, which we all need. We've seen that. So I think all that's how I feel, so why I feel so uncomfortable.
And sort of following on from what you were saying about the response that you've had from people, are you aware of the student protests that have been happening at the University of Manchester? And if so, how do you think the university should deal with that?
Well, look, first of all, the right to protest is pretty fundamental, and I think it's part of the democracy, the values that we have. Many of these great achievements that we have achieved have not been without struggle. This is a city of Pancras, you know, the women's right, the work and the right to vote, all that. We have many other examples. Peterloo Massacre again is linked to the city as well. We have a proud tradition. I remember, when I was a councillor in Manchester Town Hall, when there was South Africa apartheid thing going on. This is a city which had covered the coat of arms of South Africa because we felt with a black cloth that this is not acceptable. So I think young people have always been there, have a strong this moral direction, and when they see something wrong, they stand up for it. So I welcome that, and I think as university, of course, they should also be working with the students. I've been a part of Manchester Board of Governors for 7 years. I think they also have a responsibility towards the students and listening to them, and in a way helping them, encouraging them, because we are producing the next generation. And this is one of the finest universities in the world. I set up a good example in Israel as well for peace.
Well, I don't know if you're aware, but some students that have been involved in these protests and have been quite vocal about how they feel about what's going on are facing, or could face, quite severe disciplinary action from the university. If that happens, what will you be doing about that?
Well, I represent many students, and if an issue does come to me, I always do my best to help to get it resolved. And I would also urge the university to take a look at this and show a bit of leniency, a bit of compassion, understand, that even if they've done it in a way which they may not approve, but they're sort of coming from the right place, So anyone I think who wants to see peace, I would try to work with them personally.
Have you spoken to Keir Starmer since your resignation?
Not since my resignation, no. But just before resignation, I did speak to him. And he actually understands it, and probably that is something university could learn from as well. He understands that within this one side, the need for a collective responsibility, why he has to push that through. But at the same time, he also understands that whilst we may have different positions, we all want peace. And therefore, he's been lenient, even for myself, when I had made the speech, even asking for a ceasefire, he had not taken any action. So that, I think, is in a way example to the universities as well.
So do you think he's doing, how do you think he's doing at sort of keeping together party unity in quite a vocal split?
I think he's charted it out his way in a particular manner, and I do understand that. I think the fact that he is showing this understanding, when he's been asked about this, the fact that when I was part of the collective responsibility and I was calling for a ceasefire, he did not discipline me. He understood it, but he sort of encouraged, toward the line. I think it's a good example that even once this had happened, they were asked whether these ministers who had resigned, whether they would be allowed back in. He didn't even rule that out. He understood, that look, they're all coming from a good place. And he also, in a way, underplayed the differences that exist by acknowledging that we're all sort of trying to travel in the same direction. It's just some are more ahead than the others, which I think is a good and also clever, actually.
So do you think it's a possibility that he could win you back into sort of your position that you held before your resignation then?
Look, I wouldn't say no if you'd asked me. My issue is this particular one issue. And even this, I acknowledge that the Labour Party has come a long way from where it started off with this conflict. I think there are a lot of things they are saying which I like. I like this idea which they put in the amendment that the International Criminal Court should be allowed to look into both sides in the way they conducted this. I welcome this because I think we should do the international community. We should set an example for other countries too. So I like that. He also is emphasizing the importance that we get this issue resolved so it doesn't go back into the cold store. I also welcome that because I think this cycle of violence actually does no one any good. And when this cycle of violence is getting more and more vicious, deadly, more loss of innocent life, we have to break this cycle. So I also welcome that. So that difference is very much a narrow, I would say. I want to see a Labour government, and even if I'm on the back bench, and I said this to Keir as well, my number one priority is to see a Labour government, because I think that would be far better than the government we have. Even on this issue of Gaza, they're appalling, because I think if you look at the Prime Minister going to Israel saying, I'm standing shoulder to shoulder with you, and then standing in front of a military plane where they've given some military equipment, I just think that's totally wrong role to play. Because Israel is not a weak country. Israel has got one of the strongest militaries and nuclear power. Yeah? They don't need more military help. They actually need the help to achieve peace. And that's the role we should have played. And I think this government has not been good. Even in the UN, when we had 120, they did not sort of vote for the peace. Why? So they're not even doing their job right, I think.
And lastly, I just want to follow up on something that we discussed the last time that we spoke, because it was around the same time that the former Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, was trying to she was saying that she wanted to have less international students. And when I spoke to you about that, you expressed quite severe disappointment, saying it was backward thinking. Since then, have you been made aware that the University of Manchester is doing in-person spot checks specifically for international students? And if so, what sort of atmosphere do you think that creates for international students?
Yeah, well, look, I'm not quite aware with what Manchester University is doing, but what I can say to you is, first of all, thank God that Suella has gone. She's been awful. We've seen this also in the Gaza, how those hundreds of thousands of people marching for peace, she sort of labeled them as hate mongers. Then the language about immigrants and the boats and all that, and the way Rwanda and everything, such as been totally against the values British people have. On the point of students, I do feel that Manchester University and MMU are great universities in Manchester, and we have so many overseas students who are a great addition to all of us, for our universities, to our economies, to our cultural life, and we should encourage all that as something positive. We shouldn't do anything which actually undermines this. It benefits us in every way you can think of.
Afzal Khan, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.